Hello and welcome to today's Payments Journal webinar, Anti-Fraud Strategies to Combat Payments Fraud in the Age of AI. I'm Rima Katz, Editor-in-Chief at Payments Journal. Today we're diving into the accessibility of generative AI and its impact on fraud detection. While advancements in AI have made the technology more accessible, they've also encouraged fraudsters, blurring the lines between legitimate and fraudulent transactions. This surge in AI-powered fraud is projected to reach 10.5 trillion by 2025. We're going to delve into this further, and I'm joined by two great panelists. Why don't you each tell the viewers a bit about yourselves? Max, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rima. Great to be here, everyone. My name is Max. I'm responsible for payments risk in Galileo.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Libby. I work on the fraud and security team with Javelin Strategy and Research, doing consulting, report writing, research, that sort of thing. Prior to that, I worked at FICO for a great many years doing payment cards fraud analysis. And I'm happy to be here, happy to be with Max. Thanks for having me today. And I look forward to our conversation.
Happy to have you both as well. Before we do get into the discussion, a few housekeeping items. Questions may be submitted through the GoToWebinar portal at any time, or you can also reply to any of the GoToWebinar registration emails, and our team will get back to you ASAP. The video from today's discussion will be shared by email following today's conversation. Now with that, we have a lot to unpack. Max and Kevin, I really want to start the conversation around the impact of AI on fraud detection and the customer experience. AI has been a tool for fraud prevention for some time now. How has the integration of AI and fraud detection systems revolutionized the way that companies approach fraud prevention, and what measures are being taken to really combat this negative impact that it has on the customer experience?
That's a great question, Rima. I think the latest evolution of the AI, primarily within the financial industry, opened a lot of doors. If we just start thinking maybe 10, 15 years ago, when we were just generating and being a little bit more reactive, I would say, with the approach we're taking around the fraud, the evolution of the ML, the evolution of the AI opened the doors for us to be able to generate advanced modeling capabilities, advanced pattern recognitions, to be able to analyze the behavior analysis and basically enable us to generate an adaptive learning of the client activity, of the client behavior. Taking one step ahead, if you're looking at the Gen AI, that is a big topic of discussion recently, the ability to create chatbots that interact with the individuals and enable us to basically create a real-time conversation and to address the fraud patterns that the client is seeing is the next step in the AI evolution within the fraud. The natural language processing capabilities that it opened up and the ability to be able to address those models so much faster compared to before is just a huge leap in the fraud controls that we have available in our arsenal right now. Just one other example, maybe the improvement in the link analysis and the ability to visualize, create visualization of all of those capabilities makes the entire ecosystem, first, it makes it more friendly, but then at the same time, if you're looking at, you mentioned the client friction and the negative impact. If you're looking at the impact on the customers, it enables us to be very surgical with the population we are coming to address. It enables us to be very surgical with even to the level and granularity of specific individuals, such that we are minimizing the impact, but at the same time, we are also catering for the customer experience. I think overall, the narrative of the AI and the fraud and the evolution comes to be that AI and fraud is a supportive function of our end-to-end client journey and the client experience. So it's the impact is tremendous. There's so many more things to come, and it's just, I think we can talk about this topic for hours, but Kevin, I would love to know some of your thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was my first thought, is that we could go on forever and ever. I don't think it's possible to address all of the myriad ways that artificial intelligence and machine learning have affected the industry. I think there's just too much there to discuss. But I am happy, as you did, to go ahead and highlight a couple of points. I think number one has to do with what you mentioned, Max, in terms of a faster experience. Artificial intelligence has increased automation. Artificial intelligence and machine learning-based modeling have made identity verification and authentication and transactional fraud detection far more efficient than ever before. Model creation is able to be automated and recursively learn from previous experiences, such that exceptions requiring manual review become less and less common over time. That's a huge win for commercial enterprises and for financial institutions, in that it frees up human capital that would otherwise be tied up with those manual reviews. And that allows them to utilize their workforce more efficiently and to stretch departmental budgets a bit further than they otherwise could. That automation has been particularly helpful in terms of aiding financial institutions in getting through the mountain of SARS filing, for example, that they have to do every month. The second thing I would mention is that artificial intelligence has increased model efficiency and efficacy, in that AI-assisted fraud modeling is very good at this same thing you mentioned, Max, anomaly detection and link analyses. That allows for identifying new trends or threats faster than human beings generally can, especially when you're looking across countless users, accounts, and transactions over the course of a single day, and continuously from minute to minute. That's been particularly helpful in identifying potential money mule accounts and interrupting money laundering activities, among other things. And then third, AI allows for the creation of more complex models, which is simply to say that AI is capable of creating rules or models that take into account a larger number of testable parameters than manually created rules-based systems ever could. And AI systems can be flexible in terms of considering the interaction between those tested parameters and adjust what data it prioritizes or how it interprets that data based off of how other interconnected variables are aligned at any given moment. So I think we're pretty much on the same page in terms of what the major benefits are, but as you mentioned, I'm pretty sure our exhaustive list would take more than the time that we have.
Max, you spoke about, taking this proactive approach, and I think that there's quite a discussion around being proactive versus being reactive. Can you kind of elaborate a bit more on taking proactive AI-enabled strategies that can be employed to stay ahead of payment fraud trends, and how do these differ from traditional reactive methods?
Absolutely. As we're thinking about the reactive approach, one thing we should take into consideration is the operational component, the operational constraints. In order to stay relevant in the industry right now, every single financial institution must deploy proactive approaches. And reactive is just not a feasible solution to sustain the business. It's an approach that basically caters for upfront for fraudsters, for losing financial means of the company. The reactive approach is, why is it so critical? First, even though we are generating the friction, as we mentioned before, the AI enables us to be more surgical with the friction that we're posing on the clients, but also the proactive approach enables us to upfront detect those anomalies through the AI. The link analysis that we mentioned, the accuracy of the models that evolved make this entire proactive approach so much more accurate. Some of the examples that are available on the market right now, and we actually have some of them here in Galileo. The common point of compromise. I think it's a great example where we are pretty much notifying the financial institutions or the customers that they might be subject to any kind of potential fraudulent activity, and in order for them to save the financial means, we can either replace the card, we can take any other measures, or to the extent even restrict some of the customer spend. Being more reactive means to keep our hands on the pulse all the time in terms of model accuracy, model refresh, making sure that even the rules, which a lot of recent fraud fighters think somewhat irrelevant, but we cannot get rid of them. It's the necessity to be able to adjust even the rules at near real time, creating some kind of a mechanism that allows us to profile the individuals, profile populations, locations, merchants, and so on and so forth in real time. This is what will allow us to be more proactive. This is what will allow us to be more accurate and surgical with our approach. The impact of the proactive approach can be measured post fact, but then at the same time, it can also be measured whether the customers keeping their cards as the top of the wallet, or keeping the utilization of any financial instruments as their top priority. So the measurement, employing proactive approaches and measuring what is the impact of the proactive approach, it becomes pretty much a paramount of every operational and fraud fighting approach in the industry right now.
Yeah, I think that pretty much says it all. I might reiterate a couple of your points here, but I think a big difference between artificial intelligence assisted tech and more traditional methods relied on in the past is seen in the speed of knowledge acquisition, and as you were talking about, in the speed of application that takes place with AI. In many cases, I feel like AI is ultimately still reacting to shifting trends or new fraud methodologies, but the difference between AI and traditional models is that even that reaction on the part of AI can become a near instantaneously learned lesson. That lesson can be rapidly incorporated into recursive models, and that system then can apply those lessons across all future monitored transactions. So just as Max was saying, it is profiling real time, it's adjusting rules in real time, and I think that's where it becomes a more proactive approach, because you're not waiting for so much fraud to take place or waiting for so much data to come in that traditional models and human-based rules can catch up to what's been going on. So in that sense, an initial reaction very quickly becomes a proactive approach to any other time that fraud methodology might be employed in the future. And then you mentioned also, it's funny that you mentioned points of compromise and blocking cards and that kind of stuff. In my previous job, that's a lot of what I was doing. And I think fraud prevention systems are set up not only to determine which payment cards are already experiencing fraud tied back to a particular point of compromise, but more importantly, determine what population of cards have yet to experience fraud and are at risk because of that compromise. And when making those types of predictions, artificial intelligence can pull in a wealth of data and learn from previous similar fraud and skimming incidents to better define the scope of this particular compromise and proactively identify the cards most in need of protection.
You both touched upon this already a bit, but I want to dig a little deeper specifically into real-time decisioning and multi-channel protection. Max, how do smart decisioning rules and AI algorithms work in real time to address payment frauds across various channels? And what challenges are faced in ensuring that it's efficient and accurate across these channels?
I think that's a great question, and it's probably one of the biggest pain points in the industry right now. The fact that every financial institution caters for cards, ACHs, Fed wires, hopefully in the very near future, wires, and so on and so forth, basically leaves a wide gap between with our ability to connect all of those channels together. The fact that a individual or a financial institution, to some extent blind what happens with the money movement component of it versus the card, whatever happens within the card universe of the same financial institution, creates an enormous gap and a major opportunity for the bad actors to penetrate the system. The paramount pretty much of the entire fraud ecosystem is to create one single platform, one single solution where the feedbacks, the inputs, the signals from every single money movement channel and trigger of a money movement will have this, let's call it an octopus effect here. Probably we are creating a new term here in the fraud industry, I hope. An octopus effect where we know exactly the impact on one payment methodology onto another. We know how, if the account takeover happened and the money are being schemed through a traditional wire transfers or ACHs, have impact on the cards. If all of those, by the way, must be created in real time. The fact that, as we said before, the fact that the reactive approach fails is primarily because we are going to lose enormous amount of funds, and this is again the difference between staying in the business, being relevant, and cater for the client needs. So it becomes a necessity to create a single ecosystem of communication channels for every single channel to be able to talk to another. BNPL, as I mentioned, ACH, and so on and so forth. real decisioning, again, leveraging AI, it's something that absolutely can help in our ability to achieve this thing. But Kevin, I definitely would like to know your thoughts on this one, because it's a fascinating topic, by the way.
Yeah, it is absolutely. I think I'm going to use octopus effect next time I talk about this. I'll give you credit for it though, but I like the idea. It's good. So I would say that building parity and fraud prevention algorithms across channels can be very challenging, but it is essential to get right because criminals will exploit whichever channel shows the greatest weakness. One of the biggest challenges in securing multi-channel systems has been dealing with the fact that each channel provides its own unique set of testable parameters with which to identify fraudulent activity. Some channels have more robust data to scrutinize than others, and some don't have access to much data at all, at least not when considered in isolation. And so in some sense, in the old way of doing things, you kind of had to create largely separate models for detecting and preventing fraud in each individual channel without really incorporating information you may have from the last time you interacted with a given user via a different channel. Things tended to be segmented and isolated a lot of the time. I think one strength of AI-assisted decisioning is the ability for a program to incorporate data from across those various sources, like Max was talking about, an omni-channel approach, pulling in information from across departmental silos and even across channels to evaluate and learn from that data and create a more unified understanding of what fraud might look like generally and for a particular user or class of users specifically. AI protocols can be more fluid than manually created rule sets and consider how a pattern of activity recorded in one channel might inform the legitimacy of current activity in another channel. That allows you to leverage information and accurately identify fraud across channels in a way that would have been more difficult in traditional manually created rule set based paradigm of old. So I agree, it's all about crossing those channels, creating a one platform omni-channel octopus effect. I think that's how you solve the challenge of multi-channel fraud.
Let's take a look ahead and look to the future of AI, specifically when it comes to fraud prevention. As AI technology continues to evolve, it becomes more sophisticated. What future advancements, Max, do you foresee in the field of fraud prevention? And how might these changes also influence both fraudsters' tactics and the strategies used by financial institutions and fintechs?
Great question. There was one quote, I believe, in the Terminator, "The future is unknown." And I think with AI it actually becomes true. The future is unknown. As we are thinking about the evolution of AI, I don't know if you heard, a couple of days ago, there was a major article about a financial institution in the East Asia where an AI was leveraged heavily in a deepfake mode to create and mimic the visualization and the voice of a company CFO asking from an employee to transfer $25 million worth of asset transfers. If we were looking at those examples, if we were just thinking about those examples probably a month ago, for us, it would have been, I want to say 2030. And the fact that it happened within a month or within the last year when, for example, like the ChatGPT became so much relevant in the industry, it is just mind-blowing that we can, the bad actors can actually use the AI for those malicious activities. Are we prepared for this? We are actually closing the gap. It becomes almost like this Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner chase. We are closing the gap. We are almost getting there. But the fact that the new capabilities evolve on daily basis makes it so much harder to address. The future of AI, I would say it's probably in the enhanced detective algorithms. It's the ability to improve our behavior biometrics. The fact that we are able to get a bigger fingerprint of the device, the digital device intelligence will allow us to be a little bit more proactive and also know whether the information or even the same deepfake I just mentioned comes from even within our systems. If it comes from IP addresses, that is not so much relevant to our traditional business. The collaboration, which is critical within the AI realm as well, the collaborative AI and between the tools and the systems is what probably and hopefully will help us to be so much more proactive in the fraud prevention. The enhancements and additional leveraging of the NLP, the natural language processing, becomes so much relevant as well. Customer experience, if you think about even the generative AI right now, the customer experience through the chatbots and the ability for the client to call in and complain in real time about specific incident will allow us to take this input and convert it into actionable methodologies, either within the operational universe or within the first line of defense, converting it into actionable either rules, features, or even the ability to give our models, the existing models, the ability to learn so much quicker, right? So the collection of all of those tools together hopefully will become the future and will enable us also to avoid some of those issues that we keep hearing on daily basis right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Was that deepfake you were talking about, was that the one out of Dubai, or is this a new one now?
In Hong Kong, it is
Hong Kong. Oh, interesting.
I was
Yeah.
quite surprised. The one I believe in Dubai, where they were just using the deepfake of the facial pattern. Here, they actually went one step ahead. They were able to get a voice fingerprinting of the individual. They got the picture from social media
Right,
of the same person, and it is just fascinating how during the working hours they pretended to hop on this. I think it was one of the technologies available in East Asia for cross like talking, like Zoom or others. They were able to replicate the same individual. It is fascinating how we are talking right now on the call. I know we are all real individuals here, but the assumption is we are talking to the real person behind the scenes. Like whatever happened there, it was a person. They didn't tell us exactly, but it was a very sophisticated attack coming from some of the European countries, which means the technology not just available to a more advanced and technology savvy countries and individuals. It is just available up there for grabs pretty much everywhere for everyone. And this is what makes it so much scary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm surprised, but I hadn't actually heard about the Hong Kong one. I did hear about a similar situation in Dubai, but to my understanding, that one didn't actually involve any kind of voice print deep fake. I believe it was just voice modulation, but it was effectively calling in and requesting a transfer of something like $35 million. And because the algorithm is so effective, they were successful at getting the money. But I would say the same thing. I think the biggest trend that we're going to see in evolving technology and fraud response to that in the next several years is going to be in way of applying that artificial technology through things like deep fakes, through sophisticated phishing and whaling attempts. And I think you mentioned social media a minute ago, scraping that picture off of there. I think social media is basically going to become a data repository for these criminals, where they can go and, just like the strength of any fraud model at a financial institution or at a business is largely dependent on the quality of the data they have and how effectively they can employ that data. The same is true for criminals using technology to circumvent cybersecurity gateways and get through authentication technology and get past transaction monitors and things like that. And social media, even our broadcast today, right, becomes data that they can feed into a model to create deep fakes of you and I, of our voices, of our faces, and they could use those to any effect to scam individuals, to get their PII or have them send them money, to get past authentication protocols. I was thinking at this point that it was limited so far to human engineering, using deep fakes to get past human gateways, but it sounds like we're already at the point of getting past some of those artificial means of authenticating individuals. So I think that's what we're going to see going forward. And I usually talk about it in terms of kind of a digital arms race, right? The criminals and the cybersecurity and fraud professionals trying to stay one step ahead of each other all the way. I think we're going to see that. And the difference between what we've seen recently and what we're going to see in the near future is that given natural language models, as you discussed, I think the pace of that trying to outdo one another is only going to increase. And in some sense, we're going to be playing catch up for a while, but hopefully in the end, we still figure out how to stay that one step ahead.
And one of the, just to add to this, another main challenge that AI pretty much enabled to all the future bad actors is pretty much a no-code environment. In order for an individual to be fraudster right now, or pretty much create some kind of risky fraudulent activity, we can just request a simple request within Chat GPT. Can you please create a script to generate emails? As simple as that. A person does not need any advanced technical skills. He or she can learn throughout the process. The fact that we can link so many tools and applications together to import the voice, put the picture on top of it, creating the video calls at the same time, record the video calls, and so on and so forth. It's the part that is, I want to say, very scary about the future, right? I definitely would like to see more and more financial institutions and service providers to come up with brilliant ideas how we potentially can tackle those things. A lot of those will be most likely coming from some kind of DAOs or consortium informations, like the closed loop networks, Visas, MasterCards, to some extent even Galileo as a service provider. And it is just going to be very interesting to see the cross collaboration between all of those entities to combat such activity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the whole no code aspect is vitally important to realize, because I think what's happening now is with the AI assist, and especially with natural language modeling, where you're able to effectively talk to the computer and just tell it what you want, is that it closes the gap that might have existed for criminals in terms of their skill set. So you might have had a criminal that was particularly good at doing research on a subject, right, to try to figure out how to make a phishing email particularly convincing, but maybe their English wasn't very good. Well, a Chat GPT or any other AI program can make up for that difference. Or maybe they were lacking coding skills, but like you said, you don't need them. You can literally, I mean, there are safeguards, but you can get around them. You can literally ask the program to give you the coding script you need to engage in the attack that you want. So I think it closes that gap in skill set and allows more people who simply have the will or willingness to commit fraud to be successful in those endeavors.
You both mentioned that we are a step sort of like further in terms of like closing this gap, and I know we're coming to an end in this discussion, but Max, one thing that you had said really kind of like hit a light bulb in terms of this industry collaboration being key. I think I can safely say that we've heard that a lot this year, even last year. Can you speak to why collaboration and information is so critical, and do you have any best practices for such collaborations?
Sure. I think it's a great question. Again, if you look, the cross-collaboration within the financial institutions, I think it started decades ago, but one of the most probably famous ones that we're all familiar with, the EWS, the early warning. The fact that 20, 30 years ago, banks realized that in order to be able, back at a time, to be more proactive in detecting fraudulent activity, detecting any kind of anomalies on the money movement that was pretty much done manually back at a time. It is important to create this cross collaboration between all the major financial institutions. The evolution of EWS later on led to phenomenal industries, phenomenal capabilities, phenomenal applications. Just to name a few, like Centrelink, for example. The cross collaboration that is happening right now, even within the fintech industries, where there is a lot of intention and activity around creating a fraud repositories, like the first party fraud, the account takeover fraud. We keep hearing those about those more and more, becomes almost like a necessity for any successful program to sustain itself, as well as to protect our clients. The closed loop component, as I mentioned before, the networks, the Visas, the MasterCards of the universe, right? The Galileos of the universe, the closed loop network impact, it is so much critical, is because we are on one hand containing the data within our small universe without any potential data leakage, but at the same time we have the ability to control the type of information that is going to be shared, how the information is going to be shared, the inputs into the collaboration that is going to be revealed basically to our users. Information sharing as part of the collaboration, again, it's very critical. We should not just limit it to, oh, there's a fraud attack that happened in location A or location B. To some extent, as the regulatory landscape changes and more understanding happens within the federal government of the fraud is such a big component of the financial industry. And by the way, there's a specific reason why the CCPA and GLBA has specific exclusions for fraudulent activity. I think that there will be more and more regulatory requirements to create mutual repositories, sharing the information that spans beyond just either specific merchants or specific locations, but to some extent, if we are able to confirm an individual is a fraudulent individual, if it's a synthetic identity, can we actually share this across the board? So this is where the power of the collaboration, the necessity of the collaboration comes in place. By the way, I just want to mention that the collaboration and the DAOs and the EWSs and the Sonars of the universe, they all employ AI as well. So the fact that we have the data and we're leveraging the big data means that we absolutely must create the capabilities to be able to query this data in real time, to be able to action on this data in real time. And we have to do this in the milliseconds, right? So the evolution of the technology, the evolution of the modeling capabilities, it will allow us to be so much more successful in creating this industry collaboration.
Yeah, I don't think you can say it better than that. I think collaboration and information sharing is absolutely essential. And I like what you mentioned about the possibility of it becoming a regulatory mandate that you create these repositories. I think a potential advantage, although there's been a lot of work that's already been done on more or less a voluntary basis, where companies come together because they see the value of sharing information. I think one of the advantages of it possibly coming from an authoritative source and demanding it or standardizing the way that you share that information is, one, the information becomes accessible in real time, as you're mentioning. Two, it has a standardized form so it can be used reliably across systems. And three, I think as much as I think any financial institution or business might recognize the value of information sharing insofar as how it helps them fight fraud, I think sometimes there's still a little bit of hesitation to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain, right? And show what kind of struggles any particular business is dealing with, or what kind of fraud is affecting them, or to what dollar amounts it's affecting their budget. So sometimes having those, for example, government mandated repositories as the means of sharing that information allows people to rest more assured that their information will be anonymized, that their secrets, as it will, or their struggles won't be made so public, and everybody can kind of take advantage of that same information. I would also mention in terms of just the value of that sharing and where I've seen it pay off in my own career. As I had mentioned before I came to Javelin Strategy and Research, I worked for a company that did payment card analysis and looked for points of compromise and things of that nature. And one of the major differentiators in what we did versus what our counterparts at financial institutions and even at the transaction network did is we had access to much more data. We had access to data across financial institutions. We had access to data across transaction networks. And as a result of that, we were able to be far faster in identifying fraud and points of compromise and being proactive about getting cards shut down to avoid additional fraud and save those losses for the financial institution and that hassle for the consumer. And I think that alone demonstrates the value of looking beyond just your own business borders and looking at data that's accessible across the industry and what a difference that can make in terms of speeding things up and creating a more accurate model on which to identify and then ultimately combat fraud.
It's interesting if you look at the evolution of this collaboration, mainly outside US. I know, unfortunately, we're a little bit lagging behind the regulatory requirements compared to the rest of the world. But European Union is actually a great example where, as of, I believe, 2022, the requirements of fraud reporting became a mandate. There is a PSD2 requirements for any financial institution to start reporting on fraudulent activity. And there is a rationale behind this because this is just a foundational blocks of creating the repository at a government or federal level. The GDPR in United Kingdom, again, a foundational block for enhanced payments services and reporting those to the regulator as well. If you look just over the last couple of years, maybe 2 years, the fact that the British government now requires financial institutions to employ a fraudulent measures, fraudulent tools and capabilities to facilitate any type of payment. It is, I almost want to say it's a mind-blowing because in US, we are getting towards this phase, but we are still lacking. There's a requirements, for example, by NACHA that require us to be able to properly and adequately address any kind of fraudulent activity in the money movement, but it is still not as robust and firm as whatever happens overseas. So I hope that at some point we will be able to get to the stage where this cross collaboration obviously happens within the United States at the government level, but at the same time, it's also the opportunity for us to learn from the other either in the institutions or entities how they're facilitating some of those activities. So a lot of learnings to be done, but I think we are on the right direction with all the recent companies that are being established specifically for this activity.
Absolutely.
Max and Kevin, thank you both so much for your outstanding contributions and for really shedding light on how a multi-layered fraud prevention framework bolstered by advanced AI and machine learning, it not only proactively mitigates risk, but also consistently minimizes losses from fraudulent activities. At the same time, outpacing automated fraud schemes. So we are closing the gap, Max, as you said, so definitely a lot to look ahead at. As a reminder, this recording will be shared with everyone following the discussion. I'd like to thank you both again, and thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Remo.
Good to see you. Take care.